everyone. Just going to speak very briefly, try to be brief, I wrote it out so I would be brief, about the Passover Seders that Paul used to hold. Kendall asked me to talk about them, thinking that perhaps not everyone here knows about this tradition that happened from about 1993 or so. It started, Leanne Littlestone had a Seder for her friends at her apartment about 1992. And anyway, Paul was there. What stands out in my mind is a positively magenta borscht that Paul would make and served in this big white dish. And he made this delectable flourless chocolate cake, and then I learned that he got the first flourless chocolate cake was made by Rachel Koloff, and that he did that after. And then he had this plastic doggy chew toy that he used as the Paschal lamb. And as the years went on, we all started to, got older. We started to need readers for the Haggadah. And we became sort of a once-in-a-year family. Paul was Uncle Saul. And then, we needed the readers, especially because Paul liked to have it be candlelit. And sometimes the Xerox Haggadahs would accidentally catch fire, and that's actually a smell I associate with Passover now. And but we had the greatest discussions, of course, during it and after, and that's the Passover story, Paul. That's not what the song is. I just wanted to write a song for Paul for friendship, because when Paul turned 50, or for his 50th birthday, he asked me, do I know how many songs about friends? He just didn't know. There are a few that we all know that come to mind. And so I thought, let me make a friend song for Paul. So here it is. And it wasn't easy, because Paul is such a tremendous person, so many things about him. And I finally came up with this chorus, and it repeats a couple times. So if anyone wants to sing along, this is the chorus. Pack your bags, bake your cake, pay the bills, sit down by the lake, plant tomatoes, read that draft, call your contact, make me laugh. I recall walking down your hall into your studio, the art on all the walls, posters of all your successes, lots of folks in sequin dresses, photographs everywhere, friends all looking cute, and one or two I see of you, black and white in a plaid suit. Pack your bags, bake your cake, pay the bill, sit out by the lake, plant tomatoes and read that draft, call your contact, make me laugh. A great big computer screen where you show me something wonderful that you've just seen with your friend in person. Then you share a funny anecdote. Then you show me something you just wrote. Ask me how I'm doing. You really want to know. And then you pack your bags, bake your cake, pay the bills, sit out on the lake. Then we talk about it in your apartment one-on-one. Then you pack your bag, take your case, pay the bill, sit down by the lake, plant tomatoes and read that tract. Call your contacts, make me laugh. Oh, you make me laugh. And it feels real good to laugh.
Listening to all that talk about the delicious Seder reminds me of Paul has had holiday dinners with me and my family for the last 35 years or so. When we started, it was a lot of ham for him, maybe bacon for brunch the next day. And as we got farther and farther in our friendship, soon I had to cook, spaghetti for Thanksgiving. And then we had to go all the way to tofurkey. So my poor children who thought Thanksgiving was this wonderful thing they'd heard about in school with the turkey and everything else got to experience the joy of tofurkey. And the funniest part of that was one year Paul quite shyly asked me, "Do you think I could have my new boyfriend over?" He had never asked me to have any of his friends over for any of the big holidays. And I said, "Well, of course, if you're asking me, it must be somebody serious." And so the door rang and Paul came in and Kendall came in. And Kendall sort of stood at the front of the door into the kitchen and said, "Wow, that smells really nice." And I said, "Well, thank you so much." And Paul went over and opened the door of the oven to look at his beautiful tofurkey. And Kendall came over to look at it. And Kendall burst into tears and said, "Wait, there's turkey too?" So that's the way that my children will always remember Kendall, as being so delighted that while Paul had his own thing, there was plenty of space for Kendall too. One of the things that's been amazing to hear about is Paul did have all of these friendships, very individual. But I also feel like every single person in this theater sort of has heard about each other. I think about, Paul as, he's our Kevin Bacon, right? We're the first degree of Paul Lucas. And it's quite wonderful, one of the things that was always interesting to me was, we hung out a lot, was no matter where we were, and I bet everybody else in this room has had the experience, you'd be walking down the street or eating in some really obscure place, and someone would walk along and go, "Oh, Paul!" It didn't really matter where you were. I could have been, we could have been in a monastery and somebody would have known it. Well, actually, saying about monastery, I probably shouldn't tell you the story, but Paul is the godfather of my first child, and he took things seriously, well, perhaps not so seriously. So those of you who are Catholic will know that the priest comes over and the godfather is holding the baby, and the priest said, "Do you renounce Satan and all his works?" And Paul answered, "Yes." And then the priest asked, "Do you renounce the glamour of evil?" And Paul said, "Well, not the glamour part." So at the end of the baptism, which was sort of touch and go, by the way, the priest came over to me and said, "We do private baptisms too." Oh, God. I just loved Paul. He was in my life for 40 years. I'm sorry. Paul used his listening skills every day to listen to us. But he also wasn't just listening to individuals in the room. And he was never the guy who was listening, trying to figure out when he could speak, like so many of us do. Paul was really committed to listening to underrepresented groups. It was a really big deal to him to not just listen to the people in his life who agreed with him all the time, or the people in his life that he, were part of, like him going to be the godfather of my child and going to talk to a bunch of Catholics. One day, Paul told me that he had become really interested in the trans community. And it had happened because he was having a conversation with one of his friends around a trans woman, and that friend said, I don't really understand that. What is that trans thing really like? And Paul thought to himself, well, I don't really know what that's like either, but instead of just being dismissive and saying, I don't know what that's like, Paul decided what he was going to do was one of his classic listening tours. So those of you who have been on the receiving end of this, it starts with, hey, can I ask you a quick question about? And that quick question becomes a long dialogue, and soon enough it was 2 people he talked to, and then by the end of it, it was 300 people that Paul had talked to about their experience, as trans women. And the most impressive part of all of that was when he came up with his brilliant play. He was so careful that that play was the voices of those people themselves. Paul didn't impose his own language on those people. Paul decided what he really wanted to do was amplify the voices of people who hadn't been heard yet and create a space for them to be heard by audiences around the world. And he did. It pains me so much to know that he had started work on the next piece of that trilogy. On the other hand, we all are very blessed to have the first part that came to us because there was a guy who decided, I don't really know why people are like that, let me find out, and let me share it with the world. So that's our Paul. Kendall, there'll be turkey again. Thank you.
Transcripts is a collection of stories about the trans experience as told in the words of trans women who I've interviewed over the course of 5 years.
My life is the basis for the role of Sandra in Paul Lucas's award-winning play, Transcripts. As I am now in the autumn of my life, having no children, I find myself frequently wondering what footprint I shall leave when my time here is over. So, when Paul asked to hear my story, to possibly include my experiences in his play that was to become Transcripts, I thought that it was a wonderful opportunity to, perhaps, create a small legacy that might live on long after me. I'm so proud to have been part of Paul's play, which really is not so much about gender as it is about life.
I miss you, Paul. I think about you so often. I'll always thank you for the chance you took in casting me in Transcripts. You gave me my first theatre job in 16 years, and you knew how much that meant to me. I can't thank you enough for placing your trust in me to play that part in your brilliant play Transcripts. You gave my community a voice and a platform, and I will be eternally grateful for what you did for me personally and professionally, and indeed for the visibility of my whole community.
I would say the fondest memory I have of Paul is not only Transcripts, but the day he brought me to his beautiful residency in Jersey, and we listened to winter music because it was December. It was around the time of the holidays, and it was the 2 of us, and we just rode and rode and rode and drove. We did canoeing, and we just enjoyed ourselves, and I will never forget how sweet his spirit was. I'll never forget how joyful and uplifting he was, but also proactive when it came to activism. He was just everything, and I'm glad I could just send this message to y'all and sharing love for Paul, and he was an angel really on this earth. I love y'all, I miss y'all, and yes, I hope I see some of y'all soon.
Having given people an opportunity to meet 7 trans women and to let them feel as though, oh, I know more. I feel like I have the beginning of understanding of the trans experience, and then to have somebody say, there are hundreds of thousands of stories. I have my own story and my own journey that I'm on. That's what I want people to walk away with.
I'm Tatiana.
Sandra.
Stephen. Zakia.
Luna.
Josephine.
Violet.
We are Emily.
Lorelei.
Jolie. Kimberly.
Mariah.
Amanda.
Rosie.
Rhiannon.
Delia.
Sasha. Coco.
Malou. Ola.
Shelley.
Sarah.
Talia.
Rebecca. Lakshmi.
Samia.
Rory.
Andrea.
Nikki.
I'm going to sing a song that always reminds me of Paul. First of all, because one day he said to me, I'd like you to meet somebody, which he had never said before. He had only ever said, I met somebody, or I left somebody, or I can't get away from somebody. But he, I think this is really how he felt about Kendall. And this song is even more significant now, since he used it to serenade the residents at the hospital, to ring a bell right after he and Kendall orchestrated the now famous series of radiation countdown selfies. They are the perfect example that Paul and his partner in crime and life and art, Kendall, were always being creative alchemists to constantly be creating from anything that life could throw at them, at him, the good and the bad, into an opportunity for celebration and a fabulous, generous, amazing production number. Ask me, how do I feel? Ask me now that we're cozy and clinging. Well, sir, all I can say is if I were a bell, I'd be ringing. From the moment we kissed tonight, that's the way I just gotta behave. And if I were a lamp, I'd light. Or if I were a banner, I'd wave. Ask me, how do I feel? Little me with my quiet upbringing. Well, sir, all I can say is if I were a gate, I'd be swinging. And if I were a watch, I'd start popping my spring. And if I were a bell, I'd go ding dong, ding dong, ding. Ask me, how do I feel from this chemistry lesson I'm learning? Well, sir, all I can say is if I were a bridge, I'd be burning. I just knew my morale would crack from the wonderful way you looked. And if I were a duck, I'd quack. Or if I were a goose, I'd be cooked. Ask me, how do I feel? Ask me now that we're fondly caressing. Pal, if I were a salad, you know I'd be splashing my dressing. And if I were season, you know I would have to be spring. And if I were a bell, I'd go ding, dong, ding dong, ding.
I'm Barbara. Paul, you missed COVID. No masks. Wonderful. He did like a good party, though. Isn't this like a good party? You know? And thank you, Tracy, who's been stalwart, rehearsing with everybody. And Paul loved a good drink. That's why we're partying, you know? In fact, if I'd thought about it, I probably would have walked out here with a little vegan martini, just to pretend I belong. Anyway, some years ago, I finally met Kendall at a party. Of course, it's a party. And of course, Paul said, "Give us a song." So, and Kendall requested this, and I thought, sure, why not? Because it's more of a reverie than anything else. And you know what? Tracy was there on that night. She knew exactly what was going on, right? And it was like we kind of blended. It was delicious. So she's not actually accompanying me. I'm collaborating with her. Oi. Don't look at me in that tone of voice. Skylark, have you anything to say to me? Can you tell me where my love can be? Is there a meadow in the mist where someone's waiting to be kissed? Oh, Skylark, have you seen a valley green with spring, where my heart can go a-journeying over the shadows and the rain to a blossom-covered lane? And in my lonely flight, haven't you heard the music in the night? Wonderful music, faint as a will-o'-the-wisp, crazy as a loon, sad like a gypsy, serenading the moon. Oh, Skylark, I don't know if you can find these things, but my heart is riding on your wing. So, if you see them anywhere, won't you leave me there? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do-do-do, and in your lonely flight, haven't you heard the music wonderful music faint as a will-o'-the-wisp, crazy as a loon, sad like a gypsy, serenading the moon. Oh, skylark, I don't know if you can find these things, but my heart is riding on your wings. So if you see them anywhere, won't you lead me
Paul and Kendall were perfect for one another, but even so, the path to togetherness was long, 9 years long. Paul was my upstairs neighbour in the East Village. My husband, Tim, met Kendall through his friend Rita Leistner at the International Centre of Photography. I first suggested Kendall meet Paul sometime around 2003. We were sitting on a Brooklyn fire escape on a hot summer night. "You should meet my friend Paul," I suddenly blurted. I wasn't the only one who thought that was a good idea. Betsy Pizik, Paul's high school friend who sadly can't be with us this afternoon, she's important too because she had the same idea. When Kendall and fellow photographer Rita came to her apartment, the same thought occurred to her. "You should meet my friend Paul." Well, they met a couple of times at social events with lots of other things happening and nothing happened. Okay, technicality. Kendall was dating someone else. Long distance. Paul was seeing someone young and handsome and utterly unreliable. By 2009, 6 years later, I had completely given up. So I didn't even give it much thought when they both ended up as guests at a house party at my upstate home. It was a small, debauched affair, and the sleeping arrangements were not particularly well thought out. At some point in the wee small hours, I unfolded a couple of cots in the living room and apologized to Paul and Kendall that they were strangers sharing a room. I remember crawling into bed that night and telling Tim what I'd done. "Oh, really?" he said. "I wonder if anything will happen." Bingo! They hit it off right away. They met for dinner a couple of weeks later. Romance was in the air, but Kendall was still in that pesky long-distance relationship. So now, it's 2012, 3 years later, and 9 years after Kendall and I sat on that fire escape. Kendall was pushing his dear friend, Elaine Swan, in a wheelchair outside the building where she and Paul both lived. And there was Paul. Kendall was single at last! The way he tells it, it was as if he saw Paul through new eyes. Paul was wearing a purple sweater, and the sun was shining. They were both about to go on long trips, but thank Venus, they actually set up a date for 6 weeks later. And the rest was history. And there you have it. Love, 9 years in the making.
I'm Anita.
I'm Hugh.
And we're from New South Wales, down under in Australia. This is a song that Paul and I sang a lot together through the years. I know you'll enjoy singing along too. Why do birds suddenly appear every time
do stars fall down from the sky every time you walk by? Just like me, they long to be close to you. On the day that you were born, the angels got together and decided to create a dream come true. So they sprinkled moon dust in your hair of gold and starlight in your eyes of blue. That is why all the folk in town follow you all around. Just like me, they long to be close to you. Why close to you? Why close to you? Why close to you? Why close to you?
Well, all I can say is wow. I know that everyone in this room feels the love that I feel, and I think that should be the theme of the day. I want to first and foremost, I do want to thank every single performer, every single speaker, every single person behind the scenes that's helped bring all this together, and that all of these people have done this generously because of Paul. I also want to thank all of you. You know, a number of people said to me, you're going to have the celebration of life 2 years later? Who's going to come? These are people that didn't know Paul. And they didn't know that he had literally over 4,000 contacts in his phone. They didn't know that the multitude of that 4,000 were people that Paul had intimate relationships with. Really, really special relationships with. They weren't mere acquaintances, and that's what made Paul special. And I don't want to cover that ground because it's already been covered. But I will say this. Paul said to me at one point in the last several months of his life, he said, you know, I'm leaving all my friends to you. And I didn't know how I felt about that. It's a lot, but it's also quite lovely. And so thank you for the love, and thank you for everyone that's here and who's participated to make today so special. As has already been said, Paul and I met later in life, I should say, at middle age. And it's interesting, you know, from the moment we met, it was clear to both of us, it was completely mutual, that we'd never had a relationship like we'd had with each other. He hadn't had one, I hadn't had one. And it was easy, number one. He kept stressing, I can't believe how easy it is, which made me wonder what kind of relationship he had before that. But it was truly easy, and I think in part because we had so much in common, legitimately in common. It was also balanced, and I think the balance is key, and it's hard to achieve. And last but not least, we accepted each other where we were. We knew that at that point we were fully formed, and we weren't going to change anything about either one of us. And so we accepted the differences, but we embraced the similarities, of which there were many. In sum, I would say that we learned how much richer life can be when you have that right person to share your life with. I never imagined it could be like that, and I know that he didn't either. I'll share a quick story, and then I'm going to share photographs and let them finish me off. First, I'll say, you know, on our first trip, it was to India. We were actually having breakfast one morning, and he said, you know, I've been on so many trips to far-flung places, and I would often find myself in an amazing place seeing something I'd never seen before, and I'd turn and I'd say, "Isn't this great?" And there'd be nobody next to me. And he said, "Now there is." And it so affirmed so much for him. And it seemed like from that first trip, every time we'd get on a plane and we were going somewhere else, we would be about to take off and he would grab my hand and he'd say, "Honey, guess what? We're going on another trip, another adventure." And he would be giddy with enthusiasm, as would I. And so, there you have it. So 2 days before we realized Paul had a tumor, Paul and I went with my mom, who was in town, to Birdland, not far from here. And we went to hear a performer sing. Her name is Karen Allison. And she was singing a number of songs by another composer. And at some point in the middle of the program, she shifted to her own music. And we fell in love with the same song. And we were leaving. I remember Mom and I got to the sidewalk, and Paul was still inside. When he came out, I said, "What took you so long?" He said, "I was talking to her." I said, "What were you talking to her about?" He said, "I asked if she would let us play it at our wedding." And of course, we were completely besotted with this song. And just to let you know that Paul is working in mysterious ways, no surprise, just a couple of days ago, well actually 2 weeks ago, I was talking to Tracy and I said, "Tracy, I'd love you to learn the melody of this song because it's boring to watch pictures without music underneath." And she said, "No problem," and she transposed the music, and I was really excited. And then I thought, it would be really great if she were able to sing the song too. And I suggested this to Tomer, who's one of the people who's helping immeasurably with the production, and he said, "Kendall, it's too much to ask. She's learning all this music. Are you kidding? She can't do that." And so yesterday afternoon, she said, "I've just transposed the song. I've just got to sing it. Would that be okay?" And I thought, well, Paul is working. So here goes. Here are some images, and here's Tracy singing Karen Allison's song that we loved so much. Thank you, Tracy.
I want you to know, deep in your slumber, in the first moments of a new dawn, into tomorrow, deeper and deeper, all of my thoughts and all that I do. I miss you now, but I feel you're not far away, living inside me through all of my days. I can do anything as long as I know you love me. As we go along, ebbing and flowing, changing and growing in our own way, asking life's questions and reaching for answers. Let it be me at the end of your day. You, my love, know it now. Feel it inside me too. There in your darkest hour, all that you do. I can do anything as long as I know you love me. As long as I know. As long as I know, as long as I know, as long as love grows, as long as I know. You love me. Ooh, you're my love now. I feel it inside me too. There in your darkest hour, all that you do. I can do anything as long as I know you love me. As long as I know you love me, I know you love me.
There are two men out, and it's in the ninth, and the score is 4-3. There's a man on first, and a man at bat, and the man at bat is me. And I'm sorta scared, and I'm sorta proud, and I'm stronger than I seem. And I take a swing, and my dad is there, and it's what you call a dream. For the ball lies in the sun, and it sails off as I run. The crowd is roaring, cheering as I go. So are all the guys on the team. And I run for home, and we win the game, and it's what you call a dream. And the sun shines like diamonds. The summer sun shines like diamonds. The summer sun high in a baseball sky shines like diamonds. And the sun shines like diamonds. There are two men out, and it's in the ninth, and the score is 4-3. There's a man on first, and a man at bat, and the man at bat is me. And it's what you'd call a dream.
Paul and I like to call ourselves the Champagne Sluts. So you probably didn't know that. That's also my stage name. And so Kendall and I thought, we cannot have this. See, this is why you shouldn't ask me. We can't have this celebration without bubbly, without champagne and effervescence, and as Bianca said, joy and celebration. So we raise our glass.
And I have two more things to add. So Paul would never, ever, ever do a toast without looking at the eyes of the person, the people around the table, and the person he was with. So I'm going to ask everyone to look in the eyes, even if it's a stranger, because that's what Paul would insist on. And I also want to say one last thing. Paul never left a conversation, whether it was on the phone, on the internet, or in person, without saying, I love you.
Yeah.
He never left those words unsaid. I think there's a lesson in that for all of us. And so, with that, here's to Paul.
Here's to Paul.